Hi guys, good to see you again. It's Candice. We've got an interesting topic today. This is about private healthcare. So I'll start off by saying everyone who lives in the UK already knows this. There are millions of people on NHS waiting lists, and it's been like this even before COVID, but made much worse since COVID happened. Now, some wait lists are ridiculously long, and it's leaving people in a really dire straits where they can't get the treatment that they need, they can't even get referral for medication to be prescribed. And it leads people into this difficult position of working out what can they financially afford. And for a lot of people who've never used private consultations or private appointments, it puts them in a difficult position of having to do this research and like maths it against how much money they earn and the amount of time they'd have to wait. So yeah, I really wanted to kind of go through what I've been doing in terms of how I've been managing my health conditions, and the maths that I kind of did to kind of justify why spending so much money on private health treatments actually validates the process. So historically, private healthcare not really been that popular in the UK. I think in the last kind of 10 years, and this is coming from discussions I've had with other people with conditions like my own, people have just been adding private healthcare into their way of life. Now, a lot of companies do have private healthcare as part of their package, so that's not paid for by the people directly. We're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about having no insurance and paying for private healthcare as and when you need it. So my background, I have endometriosis, something I feel really comfortable talking about. I think a lot of people know a lot about it nowadays, but in case you don't know, it's basically where you have like tissues that usually grow in your uterus growing randomly wherever they like. And it basically just causes really bad pain, not heavy periods. Sometimes for people, fertility problems, not an issue for me. But it's awful. And it's one of these things where it can have hereditary associations and it just affects you forever. Some people it stops during menopause. Some people never stops. Symptoms vary massively. Diagnosis has been seen to take years and there's no cure. So, the only way to kind of get through it is to manage your symptoms. Now, I'll explain why I've gone into private healthcare in terms of like using it, but I'll have to explain the storyline of how I got diagnosed. So, I got diagnosed with endometriosis when I was, must have been like 21, 22. So I started my periods really, really late. So I was like 16, 17. For men who don't know, that's really late. Lucky me. They were awful. They are always awful. Everyone's period will tell you they're awful. Mine were horrifically awful, but I didn't know any better. So I just used to I was 18 at the time, like self-medicate. So drinking pills, legal pills, or paracetamol. But I just got through it. And when I was at uni, obviously, bonus, get loads of contraception thrown at you anyway, stopped your periods for a little while. As the years went on, I was using hormonal contraceptives because I hated having periods anyway, and it stopped my periods. My periods just still kept coming back. So my hormonal contraceptives weren't stopping my periods. And I was like, it's bloody annoying. I'll go for stronger hormonal contraceptives. So I was getting the stronger stuff, so like the injections, still wasn't stopping my periods. And my periods were kind of being like 20 days. So usually periods go on a cycle. So a normal cycle would be something like 28 to maybe 31 days. Out of 28 days, I would be on my period for 20 days. It was diabolical. I had horrific anemia. I was very slim, but that's because I was dying all the time. I was very, very angry all the time because it was very hormonal. So it was having a massive life impact. So yeah, that was just an awful situation. And I was like, when's this going to end? So I contacted my GP. And the way they diagnose endometriosis in the old days is they have to do a laparoscopy. Basically, they just like do a little keyhole surgery into your, just below your belly button, that type of stuff. Have a little bit of explore. And what they found was loads of endometriosis, all this stuff. They found so you can get endometriosis that causes like a big cyst type thing. That's what I had. I couldn't move one of my legs up until the point of having surgery. They did an 8-hour long surgery. It wasn't a little bit cheeky work. It was absolutely huge. It wasn't the best surgery I've ever had. It was a bit shitty. I did have to write a formal complaint because they just did such a poor job because of how bad my condition was, and also the hospital was dog shit. Standard for NHS for a lot of places. I then 6 months later fell very, very ill again. And because of my experience like with NHS, I was like, no, absolutely not. I need to have another surgery. Something's not right in my body. And I knew my body quite well because I was right and I did have something awful happen. So I went to see a private consultant in Birmingham, and we're talking big costs. We're talking consultancy appointment, £350. We're talking the surgery. Back then, I think it was £8,000. So it's a lot of money. But you got that on a 0% finance over 2 years. So I did put a deposit down. So I put a £4,000 deposit down. Got the money from my grandma and some money I'd saved because I'd only just started working. So I saved a little bit of money. So I paid £4,000, the rest on 0% finance. I ended up paying £70 a month for like 5 years. Because I paid it for like 2 years and then just paid it with the interest because it was still very expensive. And that surgery, much better. Stopped my endometriosis for a little bit, and then I could go back to having like normal NHS medications, so hormonal injections, this type of stuff, just keep everything low level. A couple of years later, as I said, endometriosis, it's not curable. A couple of years later, loads of agony. Booked to have an NHS review, and they were like, right, you're going to need a surgery again. We expect this, so we're not going to have to do loads of consultations because we know you have endometriosis. If you're in the same pain as you were before, you're going to need a surgery. Cool, great. COVID. I was waiting 2 years. In the end, the husband and I, we were like, right, this is a fucking joke. We can't wait this long. I went to see a private specialist and just said, can you just tell me how bad it's going to be? Because if we wait much longer, I'm in agony. He did a scan, like a little cheeky MRI, so £350 for the consultant, £100 for the scan. Did a scan. He was like, there's nothing significantly wrong with you. Your endometriosis is not so bad that you couldn't, if you wanted to, have a child. And he was like, and a child would treat your endometriosis. So this is a really random thing that, like, if you don't have endometriosis, you won't understand. That the historical treatment for endometriosis was to just get pregnant. It is so dumb, and I hate that. But I did. I did. But I also wanted a baby, so that's fine for someone who wants a baby. If you don't want a baby, it's not great. So we had a baby. Nice, great. Typically, after you've had a baby, and there's no issues in having the baby, which is good. I'm very lucky. It's not the case for a lot of other people. After we had the baby, people were like, "Oh, your periods won't come back for maybe like 2 months, 3 months." Like, my periods are back like 2 weeks later, because that's how intense my body loves to bleed. And we're still awful. They were a little bit better, so like a couple of months. And then they were still awful for ages and ages and ages. So my child's like nearly 3. And this May, I was just like, nah, I'm dying. So I contacted my GP and I said, listen, you need to get me on that waiting list. Because when you're referred and you're with a consultant and this sort of stuff, they take you off the list if you don't need a surgery. Because they always bring you back to your doctor, so you have to start the process again. So there's no banking and this type of stuff, or you're constantly being able to see your hospital gynecology team. No, you're back to square one. If you don't have a surgery in a diary, you're back to square one. They just stop treating you. So I contacted my GP, they put a referral in, I get my little call back. This is when it's going to be, 18 months. Disgraceful. So I spoke to the husband and I was like, listen, I could die in 18 months. Now, typically you don't die of endometriosis. You die of things like wanting to suicide yourself. You die of things of depression. You feel like you might just well kill yourself. It's really awful. So I knew I was just being a bit dramatic. But for me, I said to the husband, let's do the maths on this, because it's not always an upfront cost. And I need to consider the fact that being in severe pain stops me working, which costs me money. So like, we were trying to do the maths of it. So that's what this kind of next bit of the video is going to be about. I'm going to go through exactly what I had to spend over the last like 3-4 months. Um, what that means in terms of like ongoing spend and this type of stuff. And we're gonna have a chat about if that's worth it. If in future I need to have surgery, is that going to be financially worth it to have paid for this element myself? Because for me, I'm not coming off NHS waitlist. That's I pay my tax. I will be using that. But there's things I can do in the interim that I can pay for that number one reduce stress of thinking there's something unseen on my scans, but also gets me a head start on getting the medication that I need before having to go to a consultant. Because one of the really important things with endometriosis is the good medication can't be prescribed by a GP. Has to be prescribed by a consultant. So we'll get into that story there. But yeah, that's what we're gonna chat about. This has been a really long introduction to that, but that's what we're gonna chat about. And we'll go through it treatment by treatment, the cost, and if it was worth it. Right. So let's get into what I spent, what that was for, and what that meant. So initially, as I said, I spoke to my GP in May, and they were like, "It's going to take 18 months." And I was like, "Nah, I want to live. Thanks. I want to be able to feed my small child. I want to be able to go to work. I'm busy, basically. I'm too busy to be ill. We're all very, very busy people." So the main thing for me, the main desire was getting medication. Luckily for me, I've already got a diagnosis of my condition. So I don't need to diagnose my conditions. I don't need to have a surgery to diagnose it before getting medication. I know what medication I need because I've had it historically. I just can't get it prescribed by my GP. So I knew that I needed to speak to a gynecology consultant anywhere across the country. I'm not travelling to them. There's no point. They don't need to do an exam because they'll look at my notes and be like, yeah, she was fine with the drugs before. She can use the drugs again. So I booked an initial consultant appointment, video call. It was £350. Now, there were some that were kind of like 200 all the way up to 500, depending on specialisation. I chose a place called London Gynecology. It's, as you can probably hear in the name, really specialist in gynecology. So I tried to choose someone who wasn't going to waste my time, would know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of medication, procedures, this type of stuff. I don't want someone who's a specialist in random things. I want a specialist in what I'm talking about. So that was a really good session. It was a half an hour video call where I basically explained my issue, went in there, said, this is the medication that worked before for me. I'd like it again. So that was privately prescribed. Now, that's not the cost of the medication. That you get like a little code, little text that you take to your pharmacy. So I went to Boots, and they basically order the prescription for you, and then you get the cost. Now, the medication is available in the NHS, but you cannot convert private prescriptions into NHS prescriptions. So dumb, so stupid, but fine. So I took it to Boots, and Boots said, right, this is going to be quite expensive. All right, yeah, I know. I need to live. It's £120. Now, in terms of worth it, I took the medication. My problem immediately stopped. All pain after taking so it's an injection. It's awful to do. You've like inject it into your like thighs and legs and stuff. It's one injection you take on a monthly basis. Within 2 days, all my pain stopped, bleeding stopped. Excellent, love that for me. But I knew it worked. The context of the medication is difficult. So if you imagine a timeline, I've got 18 months before I'm going to get seen by my NHS specialist, in which case it might be 24 months before they even consider me for a surgery, right? The medication that is given for endometriosis is called leuprolin acetate. It's great. It's also like a cancer treatment. So there's big restrictions how long you can use it for. You can use it for 6 months without having any additional to protect you from getting really ill, but you can take it for up to a year. Now, that doesn't bring me close to 18 months or 24 months, but it does delay the possibility of me getting worse in that time frame. As I said, it's not a cure, it's a treatment. So my thoughts were, I can take the medication for a year, take a break, just have some pain for maybe another year, It might take a while for the pain to come back, but have some pain for a year. And then when I go back to my NHS specialist, they can re-prescribe me the medication. So like I can get 2 doses of it, one I've had to pay for, one I don't. But in the meantime, I didn't have to waste my time suffering. So that was my thought. So worth it? Out of 10? 10 out of 10. Drugs. Love it. Is expensive. So then every month that you need your medication, you have to have another follow-up appointment to make sure that there's no side effects, this sort of stuff. Follow-up appointments range from about £100 to £250. Mine was £150, fine. So it's another video call to say, medication works, didn't die, thank you. And then they prescribe my medication again. Now you see the price difference between dose 1 and 2. Now this is something that you need to understand about private prescriptions, is there is no standard price. It is completely variable depending on supply and demand. So you have no idea how much you're going to spend, but you can search between providers, and that's something you don't get for the NHS because you don't need it because it's only like £9. So this one was slightly cheaper just for the time of year. Excellent, loved it. I can't rate anything higher than 10 out of 10. Did its job. So at that follow-up consultant appointment, it was basically suggested, right, we're going to get you on your medication, that's fine, but it'd be useful for us to work out if there's anything underlying serious about this cycle of endometriosis, because endometriosis works in kind of like cycles of awfulness. So I was like, right, cool, I'll go for my ultrasound. So this one I had to leave my house for. Luckily, it was close to my workplace. Popped in for a little internal ultrasound, so a big with a stick. No one likes it, it's awful. She did a little zhuzh with a stick. She said there was nothing suspicious or concerning. So that's a good thing, because that then tells you something really, really important, that you are not in a rush. You don't need to escalate your NHS referral to be like, oh, I'm dying. But this is really important, because if she did find something suspicious, you can go back to your NHS GP and say, escalate this information, push my referral up to more significant. Because 18 months is like normal NHS referral for gynecology, but you can get a 3-month referral if, like, let's say, for example, they found a massive cyst pressing against like your nerves and you were actually like leaking and all this stuff, and you really at risk of death, or they saw something that looked like a bit cancerous, for example, you could get pushed up. So that could have been someone's journey of getting the ultrasound and being like, right now I go back to my doctors to do tests. Because to get an ultrasound on an NHS for your NHS, you'd have to wait 18-month for your appointment. Cool, 18 months. Then you go to your appointment. Then they might send you for an ultrasound like 2 months after your appointment. Yeah, 2 years. So colossal waste of time. You could just fill in the gap, and £350 isn't horrific if you're thinking of it stopping you stressing and worrying about something really, really, really serious, in my perspective. So ultrasound, telling me useful information. I mean, luckily I didn't have anything bad. 7 out of 10. The pain stopped, which is the most important thing, but then confirming for me I'm not having something awful happen to me, also excellent. So then, yeah, at my follow-up appointment, obviously these are consultants, they love you spending money. She did suggest to me that I might need to have a rheumatology consultation. So basically, rheumatology looks at autoimmune disorders, and people with endometriosis are like 80% or something more likely to have an autoimmune condition, because like your life's not shit enough anyway, you might as well just add more stuff to it. So I was like, cool, love that for me. So I just went for it anyway, because I was like, I'd rather find out now, because I was getting some pain and some rashes and this type of stuff that maybe were more aligned to autoimmune conditions. So I went to it. She had a look at me and she was like, no, you're fine. And I was like, nice, love that. So I didn't get referred for any further tests. How worthwhile was that appointment? A 2 out of 10. Not useful to me whatsoever. I think it was a bit of a reach, an overreach, and you get this with private consultants. They just love to reach into other areas. Maybe they're getting paid, probably are. One of the things that happened in that rheumatology consultation was she saw me walking. So bear in mind, I have abdominal pain, my pain's decreased a significant amount, still had a bit of like back pain. She looked at me and she was like, walk up and down, did a walk up and down, and she was like, nah, see a physiotherapist, you walk like a twat. And I was like, nice, thanks. So she basically said, alongside your medication, because I'd also had a child and this type of stuff, she said, your abdominal pain could be related to you doing a lot of desk work. So I was sitting in chairs like this all day, every day, doing a lot of desk work. I had pelvic girdle, which means like your pelvic hurts like when you're pregnant. So she was like, there's a lot of stuff physiotherapy can help alongside your medication while you're waiting for your referral. And I was like, yeah, she's got a point there. Actually, do you know what? For that, I'll bump her up to a 4. Oh, let's put it in dates. Oh well. I bumped up to a 4 for useful information. So I then saw a physiotherapist. Now, physiotherapists are cheap in comparison to consultants, very cheap. She did an assessment of me, and that there was some like muscular weakness, a lot of abdomen weakness, probably caused by like me having a couple of serious surgeries on my stomach and stuff, and it just being a very sensitive pain area. So she did an assessment, basically mapped me up, gave me a lot of exercises, and was like, this is what you need to have a solid core, which will help you manage your pain better. So I will have to say 8 out of 10 for that, for getting that information, especially because exercise is free. So you can get the information and do it. I then did decide to continue with my physiotherapy appointments just because I wanted to be able to do that supervised alongside my medication, which is good. I found them very, very useful. I'll keep it as 8 out of 10 because I had to do a lot of work there. It wasn't just like inject myself and be better. So then again, it's come to the end of June. I need my medication again. So I basically contact my gynecologist, and I say, right, let's get back, let's have another set of medication. And they say something really great. So lupron acetate, which is what I take for my medication, it comes in 2 doses, 1 monthly and then 3 monthly. Ooh. And she said to me, you're ready to be on 3 monthly because you've had no problems tolerating it. Which I could have told her at the beginning because I've had it before, but she wants to do things properly. So I took my 3 monthly medication. So this was £270. So you can see the maths here. I've saved money by having it in 3 monthly doses, which is great, and it's a lot less stress. It's an awful injection to take. Absolutely, I feel like I've got a needle stick injury. Took it last week, but makes a massive difference. So this, I'll have to actually escalate that to 11 out of 10. Just goated, just absolutely phenomenal. Feel great. And it's something every 3 months, so it saves you a little bit of money. So you've paid this upfront high initial cost, and with that, because it's 3 monthly, I don't need to have another follow-up appointment until I need my medication again. So I've actually saved money on consultant appointments. And then lastly, I just continued going to my physiotherapy appointments, because they're doing a lot of hard work, and it is helping quite a lot in terms of managing what I know will be the pain when it comes back. So this has been quite good, I think. I mean, obviously what we need to consider here is ongoing, maybe more physiotherapy appointments, probably less frequently than 3 every month. Medication, I won't have to have another medication cost till July or till October. Love that for me. I'm not gonna push for any more kind of big assessments like ultrasounds and this type of stuff. So if we imagine that this was the investment into a cheaper long-term solution, which would be what? I mean, the 270 could increase. As I said, it's about supply and demand. But if you say like £270 every 3 months, and then my physiotherapy, we won't include it because it's optional. It's the medication that makes a difference. So it's basically from now on, I only have to pay. Oh, that's my face. 420 every 3 months. That's not awful. That's on a monthly basis. We're looking at like £140-50. That's not awful in comparison to constant pain. Obviously variable dependent on the price of medication, but let's look at what that upfront cost of getting to that position of stability looked like. 2,245. So that is a lot. Obviously, you've got some optional things in there that were quite unnecessarily expensive if you were just looking at for pain management and not at like key critical information. So you could take off like £600 for that, but that is a lot to initially invest. However, if we consider that over 18 months, and the fact that doing an ultrasound or rheumatology consultation, which could say you have an autoimmune disorder, or could say, for example, an ultrasound that they find something suspicious, that could bypass a lot of that 18 months down to 3 months. So for me, I find all the medication 100% worth it. The testings here or there, it depends if you actually get good results from it. So as you can imagine, it's a risky gambit. But this is what I spent. That's what I thought was kind of worth it. And I think if you're in a position where you're kind of making that choice between being in constant daily pain, where maybe you can't go into work, you're working less hours, it's affecting your work performance and affecting your ability to be able to spend time with your family, if you think about 2,245 and carrying every 3 months cost, if you think about that over 18 months, I think you can imagine that would be worth it. At least it was for me. I mean, obviously people are in a lot of different financial situations, but for me, I felt that that was worth it. I'd love to hear anyone's comments, whether they have like a similar journey or way they think about their health, and the way they choose to manage it. But yeah, this is what it looks like if you don't have health insurance, but you just need a one-off way to make this waiting period feel less shitty and just get the medication you need to stop the pain, which should be the majority of people their priority. This is the way that I did it. I'd love to see in the comments if people had a similar way of doing things. Now, this is obviously a very sensitive topic to a lot of people. This is about pain. This is about suffering, which is a really difficult topic, but I'd advocate for people being open and expressive about what this political and economic way of living, the impact that actually has on individuals with disabilities or long-term health conditions. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've had a good time putting it together. Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting going forward to see what changes the political climate has, if we're going to see private healthcare spending go down. It's all up in the air, but we'll see what happens. But thank you for joining in. Leave me a comment. Cheers.